Hello and welcome to the Optional Practical Training Workshop. If you will be applying for OPT in the near future, then please watch this workshop to gain important background information needed to apply. After completing this workshop, please be sure to see our other ISSO resources. You can find our Optional Practical Training informational page by going to our ISSO website, finding the Students tab, and then selecting F1 Students. However, if you still have questions after this workshop, then please email ISSO or schedule an appointment with your assigned international student advisor. In this presentation, we will provide an overview of what optional practical training is, discuss planning for post-completion OPT, describe the application process in more detail, and explain what happens after submitting your application. First, here's an overview of optional practical training. So what is optional practical training? Optional practical training, or OPT, is a benefit of your F1 status as a degree-seeking student. It allows for an international student to gain practical experience in employment related to their field of study. Any employment performed on OPT must be directly related to the major that is listed on your I-20. If the major listed on your I-20 is currently incorrect, please contact ISSO. There are a few different types of OPT, but today we will focus on post-completion OPT. As the name suggests, this is the type of OPT that is available to students directly following the completion of their required coursework. This OPT is open to students of any major and is typically authorized for a 12-month period. Students who are studying what are considered to be STEM majors, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, may be eligible for a further 24-month extension of their practical training after completing the first 12-month period. But you can find further information about that in our OPT extension workshop. Who is eligible for post-completion OPT? To be eligible, you must be maintaining a valid F1 student status, and you must have been enrolled full-time in the United States for at least the past academic year. If you have previously used OPT, then you are eligible for OPT again after completing a higher education level. Planning for post-completion OPT. In this section, we will discuss important dates related to OPT, such as your program completion date, OPT requested start date, and your OPT application timeline. For most students, your program completion date is the last day of the semester in which you will complete your academic program. If the program end date currently listed on your I-20 does not match what your actual program completion date will be, then ISSO will shorten your I-20 program end date, either at the time you submit your OPT request or once we are notified of your successful program completion. This program completion date will determine your timeline to apply for OPT. A few important things to remember. Your graduation date may be different than your program completion date. Graduation is a university celebration and has little impact on your immigration status. Your program completion date is the semester in which you complete your coursework requirements. A student cannot delay graduation to extend their program completion date. For students obtaining a bachelor's degree or a coursework-only master's degree, your program completion date will be the last day of the semester in which your last required course is taken. If you will be adding a minor, second major, second degree program, or a certificate program, please speak with an ISSO advisor about how these programs may affect your OPT eligibility. Again, if your I-20 program end date is currently beyond when you will take your last required course, then ISSO will shorten your I-20 to accurately match your program completion date. For graduate students that have a creative component, thesis, or dissertation, then you will have a few options available to select as a program completion date. The earliest that you could select as a program completion date is the last day of the semester in which your required coursework was finished, excluding any research credits. Similarly, you would then have the option of selecting the last day of any subsequent semester after finishing those coursework requirements. When a graduate student enters the semester in which they will defend, then they have two further options. They can either elect to shorten their I-20 to the exact date of their defense, or they will use the default option, which is the final day of the semester in which you defend. Please note that if you defend in the interim period between two semesters, then your I-20 program end date will be the last day of the term prior to your scheduled defense. What date you select for a program completion date is important, as all on-campus employment must end on or before that day. Once your I-20 program end date is shortened, ISSO will notify your on-campus employer that your work authorization has been shortened and that you must be separated from your student employment position on or before your new I-20 program end date. For graduate assistants who elect to have the exact date of their defense be their I-20 program end date, please note that this may affect your eligibility for resident tuition and scholarship benefits. If you have any questions about your I-20 program end date options, we encourage you to schedule an appointment with your assigned international student advisor. Once your program completion date is established, then you can plan when to submit your OPT application. The earliest your application can be received by USCIS is 90 days prior to your program completion date. However, before submitting your application to USCIS, you must first submit the optional practical training request with ISSO through our online SciStart system. We ask that you do this no more than 100 days before your program completion date. Your deadline to submit an OPT application with USCIS is 60 days after your program completion date. This application window is strictly followed by USCIS. An application submitted outside of the appropriate filing window will be rejected or denied. In your OPT application, you are allowed to request an OPT start date. This start date can be anywhere from 1 day after your program completion date to 60 days after your program completion date. If your OPT application is approved before your requested start date, then the requested start date is typically granted. However, if your OPT application is approved after your requested start date has passed, then USCIS will adjust your actual OPT start date to the day that they approve your application. The requested start date is not guaranteed, and you are not allowed to begin OPT employment until your EAD card is received and you have reached the approved start date listed on the card. Let's look at two examples for a student that is finishing their program in the fall semester. In example 1, the student has a requested OPT start date of January 20th. They submit their application early in the available application window, and it is received by USCIS on September 20th. Their application is approved on December 10th, and they are granted their requested start date of January 20th. In this scenario, the student has received their EAD card well in advance of their approved OPT start date, and they must wait to begin working until January 20th. In example 2, another student also requests an OPT start date of January 20th. However, they do not submit their application until much later, on December 1st. When January 20th arrives, USCIS has still not processed the application, so the student cannot begin working. Eventually, on February 20th, USCIS approves the application, and they grant the student a February 20th OPT start date. After waiting another week or so to receive their EAD card in the mail, then the student can begin working. International student advisors frequently meet with students to discuss the pros and cons of what requested start date they should select. If you want to discuss your situation in detail, then we encourage you to make an appointment with us before you start the application process. However, there is some general advice that we can provide. Typically, students will select an earlier requested start date if they have already arranged employment that they are hoping to start as soon as possible. As mentioned in the previous slide, it is not a guarantee that your application will be approved in time for you to begin on your requested start date, but you are giving yourself the best chance to begin as early as possible. However, if you select a requested start date that is earlier in the 60-day window, and you do not have a position arranged, then your OPT unemployment days will begin to accrue at an earlier date. For students that request an OPT start date later in the 60-day window, they are giving themselves more time before their OPT period officially begins, which may mean more time to apply for jobs in their field. Similarly, for students that like more certainty, it gives you a better chance of actually being granted your requested start date. However, there may also be a few downsides to requesting a later start date. First, if you are offered a position that starts before your requested start date, you must wait to begin the job until your approved start date is reached. Second, if you request a later start date, then there may be a larger gap of time in which you do not have employment authorization in the United States, since any on-campus employment or CPT must end on your I-20 program end date.